Hey there, everybody. Welcome to today's webcast. I appreciate you joining us, where we're going to be talking all things common industry woes. As you can see, the title of today's webcast, Trending How Modern Firm Owners Are Addressing Common Industry Woes. We're going to be going through that both from a quantitative as well as a qualitative standpoint, talking about really how you do the work you do today, but just a little bit better. We're going to be running through a few different ways of doing that. Of course, we have the data, myself from the Thomson Reuters Institute, and one report that we're going to dive deep into to talk a little bit about how to run a modern tax practice better. And then, of course, we have Amanda from Padgett here as well to talk about how to apply Padgett's small firm experience to face a lot of these challenges that are coming up today. But who exactly is here talking to you? Well, first of all, my name is Zach Warren. I'm from the Thomson Reuters Institute. So you may know the name Thomson Reuters from the suite of tax and accounting software products, but I'm on the Institute, which means that I help lead a lot of research and thought leadership around particularly technology and what all this is going to mean for the future of the tax practice. I've helmed multiple research projects on technology and professional services, including earlier this year a series of generative AI reports for the tax, legal, risk and fraud, and other industries. Also, headed up some research on the state of corporate tax technology. I'm not a tax professional myself. I come from a journalism background, was previously editor in chief of ALM's Legal Tech News, and featured on law.com and other publications. But I do have somebody here with a tax background, and that is Amanda with Padgett. How are you doing today, Amanda?
Hey, Zach, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Would you mind introducing yourself and a little bit of your background?
Sure. So, my current role is the Chief Operating Officer of Padgett, which is a network across North America of accounting and tax practices. But my background is pretty deep. I started in public accounting when I was 16, actually. Worked at Deloitte back when there were six of those big firms. Started my career there in their tax department, became a corporate controller, and then eventually opened my own accounting firm in 2013. That was really the beginning of cloud technology in the accounting industry. And I fell in love with that part of running a firm. And so that's kind of where my expertise has laid for the last 10 years. Thankfully, I was tapped by our CEO to join the Padgett team a few years ago. So I get to bring that background to our 150 firms across the country, help to standardize processes, evaluate technology, work on efficiency and workflow. And I know we're going to be talking a bunch about that today.
Yes, we are. And to that point, too, there are a number of ways to gain efficiencies to standardize those practices, and we're really going to dive into a few of those. Just looking big picture, in case you haven't heard of either Padgett or Thomson Reuters and who we are, like I mentioned, Thomson Reuters is a very large company. You may have even heard of the Reuters name of it from Reuters News, but this is a completely separate part, which is software enablement. So Thomson Reuters likes to say that we are a content enabled technology company. And I think both of those are very important where there is the content. If you're doing tax research or other types of insights that are needed into what you do on a day to day basis, Thomson Reuters has that. And then the software as well, doing a lot, just like Amanda said, in reducing inefficiencies, adding greater value, and really trying to use that software to anticipate what people in tax and accounting firms need next. So, a wide array. And as you could probably guess from the fact that we're both on this webinar, Thomson Reuters has proudly supported the Padgett network for years with those software, tools, and best in class content.
So Padgett, if you haven't heard of us, we've actually been around since 1965, so going on 60 years in the United States. We're a network of small tax and accounting practices, but we've always been focused on small business since our inception. So that's really where we spend a lot of our resources and help develop our practice owners. So we support our owners from the corporate office based in Athens, Georgia. We support our owners with marketing tools, with workflow practices, development, technologies, discounts on software, and tax technical support. So we really do enable our firm owners to build whatever their dream practice is, and we help to support them in whether that's growth, whether it's lifestyle. Our corporate strategy is around making happy firm owners.
Absolutely. And I think that there are a lot of issues that today's firm owners really are trying to overcome. I know that you talk with people on a daily basis, Amanda, about some of the struggles that today's small and mid-sized firm owners are dealing with. And if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about some of those struggles that you've heard.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. I mean, folks who are listening, I'm sure feel this, that there's so much to be done on the work side, but then also the business management side. So it's hard to find enough hours in the day to do both of those well. And also to evolve, keep the practice evolving, keep it current with trends. And so one of the things that Padgett does is to come in and do some of that heavy lifting for our folks. And so I know we're going to talk a bunch today, Zach, about what some of those strategies and priorities look like. So I can't wait to get into this data with you.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Really, we're going to break this down to a few different sections. The first one is going to be the 2024 State of Tax Professionals Report, which comes from the Thomson Reuters Institute, something I know very well. We're going to pretty much throughout the entire presentation go through some of the data that we found, but start at a really high level about what exactly that is. Then we're going to dig deep into some of those issues, challenges that today's firms have, primarily talent retention and hiring. Do you have the right people not only in the office, but in the room for each matter? Pricing and revenue. This is something that we've seen has become a big issue, especially even within the past 12, 24 months for a lot of firms. And then growth and strategy. A lot of people talk a big game about getting new clients in the door, but really when you're trying to grow the firm, what is the best way to do it? And is it all about new clients? Maybe not so sure. So let's dive into the report itself. So the State of Tax Professionals report, what it is, really just kind of what the name says. What exactly do tax professionals, what do they do on a daily basis, and what do they need to know as they're looking from a business perspective, particularly, and trying to grow into the future? This is the fourth annual survey. We started this bad timing. 2020 is when we were trying to start it. 2021 is when the first report came out. But really, it's just talking with a number of tax professionals across the US, UK, Canada, Australia, Brazil, and Argentina. But the majority are US based, and the majority are small and mid-sized firms. One thing you'll see throughout is where there's really a difference between small, mid-size, and large tax firms, we'll put that in there. And that's something we'll be talking about as we go through, as well as some of those differences, especially in terms of priorities, but also approaches to the tax practice. So let's go into some of those findings, and just from a very top level, one of the very first things that we asked is, so what are the issues? What are the challenges that you really have? And we asked people just open-ended, type something in. What are those challenges? The number one, as you could see far and away, more than a quarter of people said their top challenge is people, hiring, attracting talent, better staffing. If you can see, maybe a little small on your screen, but some of the quotes over there on the right-hand side, I really like that final one under talent and staffing. It's all the strength of the team. There's currently too much dependence on a few key people. And I think that that's something that we saw over and over in the research, is not only getting people in the door, but using current teams to the best of their ability. And I'm curious, Amanda, from your standpoint, is that something you're hearing from Padgett firms as well, that the people side of this is really an issue right now?
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially almost the smaller the firm, the bigger the issue. It's very hard to backfill, find good talent to backfill what an owner is probably producing in the practice. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. So definitely seeing that as being the number one issue among small and mid-sized firms.
And a few other of these issues, time management, obviously a big one, keeping up with latest laws and regulations, also big. And then we get into the billing issues and the managing client expectations of it all. Do those ring true to life for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The money side of it, we can't ignore the fact that we're in this to do good work, but to make money doing it. This is not a volunteer job, and so it has to be a profitable proposition, and so that's it's a business venture. It's not for fun. So yeah, those are definitely things that our folks are looking to fix and improve.
100%. As much as pretty much anybody listening to this webinar is in the tax business, probably likes doing tax work, but you're not in it for the joy of it. You are in it, to your point, to run a business. So that's part of what we're doing today too, is giving some data to help try and run the business better. So, similar question to the first one, but also a little bit different. First, we asked, what are the challenges? And then we asked, oh, okay, so what are your priorities to overcome those challenges? Where are you putting your time, your investment dollars to try and change the way that you're operating the firm in the future? And as you can see in the bottom left there were some main priorities. Efficiency, a word that we've already said a bunch. You can knock off your bingo card and probably will say it a lot more. Talent, growth, client service. These are areas that may not be surprising, but we are continuing to see investment in these areas because they're continuing to be an area of challenge to a lot of firms. And I'm sure you're seeing the same, Amanda.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this, Zach, is that the number one challenge was talent, but the number one priority is to build efficiency. So that sounds to me like folks out there are realizing the talent problem is not going away anytime soon. And so it's not going to be solved with more people, probably. So they've got to figure out how to squeeze more productivity out of what they already have. A lot of that's probably around technology and process. But I think that was just an interesting point, that the priority was not the solution for the challenge, was not the challenge itself.
Yeah, I find that particularly interesting as well. And we're going to go into a little bit of that talent retention, hiring, but I think that that's something that's worthwhile to remember as we go through this as well, is a lot of these challenges are interconnected. A lot of times you can't get greater efficiencies because you don't have your people connected. You can't have better client service because you don't have the internal processes up to snuff. A lot of times you really need to, it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, I think, sometimes, of what do I fix first before I fix everything else? But it's all got to be one part of one coherent system, I think.
Right. And I think the struggle for a lot of firm owners, especially on the smaller side, is I would love to spend time rebuilding my processes and learning new technology, but I don't have the time because I don't have the people to do the work that makes money. So
it's very, very true. So let's talk about those people problems to start off, where we asked, oh, okay, so the left, you see the strategic priorities, driving efficiency, talent, and kind of how those have changed within the past 4 years. As you could see, one bar there, pricing, a much bigger issue in 2024 than it was previously. Put a pin in that. But as you could see, efficiency and talent have been consistent over the past 4 years in terms of strategic priorities. But where I want to draw your eyes to the right side of the screen, where you can see we broke this out from 1 to 3 employee firms, the small firms, 4 to 29 employee firms, large range there, but that's what we're categorizing as mid-sized firms for the purposes of this webinar, and then larger firms, 30 or more employees. The orange line in particular is where you get those mid-sized firms. And as you can see, while efficiency and talent is a big issue for everybody, it's an even bigger issue for employees of mid-sized firms. And I'm curious, especially because I know that's a lot of Padgett's sweet spot, whether you've seen the same in a lot of Padgett firms, Amanda.
Yeah, so let's dive into that for a second. This is going to be important as we go through the webinar, is thinking about the mindset of these different buckets of firm sizes. So size does matter. That's the headline of this. Size matters. 1 to 3 employee firms that we're calling small firms tend to be where the owner is probably 100% of the product, right? So the owner or the partner is the product. There's less top, high level management of the company. It's more of grind doing it, maybe some admin help, maybe some tax prep help, but the owner's basically the product of the company. And it's a lot of times not sustainable beyond the owner. There's not like a look for succession. This mid-size, let's go the other way. Let's go all the way to the bigs, right? So the bigs are hiring machines. These are the huge firms that are constantly have an open door, have nice benefits, nice salaries, all the, the prestige in their region, wherever they are. So those are the bigs. But when we look at these middle-sized firms, which is most of what our Padgett firms look like, it's a mix. So it's still owner heavy. A lot of times it's still very partner heavy, but there is hopefully a look towards succession planning, building talent underneath to backfill when the owner decides to slow down or retire, and still holding some enterprise value. There is a lot more segregation of duties generally. So you've got maybe some tax people, some accounting bookkeeping people, maybe some sales people, maybe some client onboarding management people. So it looks very different from the smalls. So I want folks who are listening to be mindful of that as we go through the rest of these slides. I will say, when I'm looking at that orange line, the top efficiency and talent, this report's been around since the pandemic. The pandemic did not do us any favors in the accounting industry, none. Except maybe some billings on some project-based stuff, but it was very stressful for mid-sized firm owners in particular, because there was constant legislation change. We were trying to take care of our clients and get them the funds they needed to stay in business. The partners carried the load for a long time. It also created, or I don't want to say it created the talent shortage, but it exacerbated the talent shortage. Accounting is not typically the most lifestyle friendly industry to work in. And so we were having high demands. We've got these partners that are needing to slow down and bow out with maybe not the backfill of talent, because folks in younger generations generally have prioritized lifestyle over material things, and so it's hard to convince someone to come into this line of work. And we've seen that is not just me waxing poetic. I mean, we've seen the statistics around less folks are coming into the accounting industry to take care of clients. So we're really seeing a squeeze, right? That's the point of this. We're really seeing a squeeze between our partners in the mid-sized firms, looking to slowly exit maybe, but not having the backfill. And so how are they going to do that? They've got to address the talent problem. They've got to have somebody to provide these products, either with people or with efficient technology.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly interesting as we move to the next slide and break down a little bit more where that hiring is coming from. Because your point about getting squeezed, where especially for the smaller 1 to 3 employee firms, it's very owner led and they have to think about their own succession planning, but it's not really thinking about like, how exactly do I grow the people and bring in all sorts of tax professionals? On the other side of things, you have the large firms where they have a lot more red tape maybe to cut through, but also a lot more ability to hire things like, say, you could see in the bottom left, data scientists or tech and IT support. The mid-sized firms are really trying to do a little bit of everything, where they are trying to hire more junior, mid-level, and senior tax professionals, but at the same time need a little bit more general support. You could see that really, I don't know if you could see the numbers super well, but the orange bars are essentially how much people are trying to hire. And as you could see, bottom right, admin and general support, it's about 50-50 for those mid-sized firms, where 47% say we are trying to hire right now. We really need not only tax professionals, but people to help us out on the back end to get those efficiencies, to make sure that we're doing things the right way, which can get a little bit sticky when you're trying to also get the type of work that the larger firms are having, but you have fewer people to do so.
Yeah, so that admin general support on mid-sized firms, that's super interesting to me, because we're not sure exactly what folks were thinking when they selected that, but what it indicates to me is that we feel that there's a professional talent shortage in accounting, right? We feel that there are not enough people to go around. So can we push down some work to admin and general support, right? So can we take some things that maybe took a professional eye in years past, but with technology and processes can be done at a more admin level. So that's kind of what I'm sensing is going on here is folks are saying, okay, well, maybe I need, instead of having a staff of only accounting and tax professionals, maybe I hire somebody from the hospitality industry or from education and have them manage projects for me, manage client onboarding, something that's not necessarily technical, but requires organization, and get that off my desk as the partner so that I can focus on doing the delivery of professional services.
100%. It requires thinking about things maybe in a slightly different way, which I know tax and accounting professionals, very numbers oriented, but thinking about things more maybe from a project manager standpoint as much as anything else, about not necessarily what do the numbers say I need to do XYZ, but from a holistic standpoint, what's the best way to get something done? And it's maybe not necessarily the way that you had done it in the past. So this kind of gets to what we were been talking about the entire time as well, in terms of, yes, it's nice to think about maybe we want to do things in a different way, or maybe it's nice to think about we can just hire tax professionals to try and fill some of these roles, but maybe not. We also asked in the report, so not only where are you trying to hire, but can you even hire? And we found, especially for tax professionals, 69% of of people that were trying to hire both senior and mid-level tax professionals said we're having difficulty doing that. And that really gets exacerbated as we look on the right too. Who's having the most trouble? It is those mid-sized firms. 72% said that they are having trouble hiring either senior or mid-level tax professionals right now, which, to what we've been saying the entire time, is an issue if you are really trying to do a lot more work and do more with less.
Yeah, no surprise here. I mean, this is what we've been feeling for a few years in the industry, and it's nice to see the data prove it out. We've seen at Padgett through our across our network, it takes about a year to find a good mid to senior level tax person, which means it's not a quickly solvable problem. If somebody leaves you, you are not going to backfill them right away. And it also means we need to start looking for either something to fill the gap temporarily, or changing the way we do these things, because it's not going to go away. We've seen this for a while, and the data is showing like it's really hard. I mean, 70%, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So the question then becomes, what exactly do you do about it? How can people, Amanda, start tackling this problem?
Yeah, so on a couple slides back, we showed that the big firms just constantly are hiring. They're not stopping and waiting for a vacancy. They are constantly hiring. So in some way, small and especially mid-sized firms have to have that mentality of, if I see good talent, I've got to get it. So whether that is taking care of the good staff that you have, and that can mean lots of things. It's not always money. A lot of times it's lifestyle. A lot of times it's culture. Taking care of those staff and making sure that when you've got somebody good, they do not leave you because they are being poached. There is somebody that they could walk out the door and go work for in a heartbeat. Always leaving the door open for new hires. So like constantly having a way for folks to reach out to you and to get your attention if they're a quality hire. Making sure again that our employees are feeling like they're doing valuable work, that they're not just putting numbers on a form, and they're not just a body, in a cubicle cranking out tax returns, making sure that they have a sense of ownership. And then the biggest one, I think, is we've got to think outside the box. It is great to grab a mid-level tax professional coming from another firm with experience and the degrees and the certifications and the credentials. That's wonderful, but that's probably not always going to it will not always be available when you need it. So
Right.
starting the process to look for these alternative hiring solutions. So like I said, hiring folks that maybe are not credentialed in accounting or tax, but can do some of these project management pieces or customer client relation pieces, and take some of the weight off the other professionals, looking for efficiency through technology, and then also looking at remote and offshoring hiring options, and getting those started. Those don't you can't just click a button and have somebody even from another part of the world showing up and doing quality work for you. There's a ramp, there's an on ramp for that. A lot of times it requires having solid processes in your practice to be able to hand off. So just constantly be thinking about, okay, this, if it's not a problem for your firm right now, talent will be a problem for your firm. And what are those things you can do to mitigate the damage?
Certainly. And I think that that's particularly instructive as we move to the next slide as well, which is kind of, I guess, the overarching point of all of this presentation is, especially if people hiring is a problem right now, the answer either hiring more may not be available to you, or maybe you start to have to think about doing things in a non-traditional way. We basically asked that question in the survey, which is, oh, okay, well, how are you trying to tackle this? And like Amanda said, there's a wide variety of different ways. Automation is a big one, and we're going to get a little bit more into that in the future. We see over on the right-hand side there, more than half, 54% of the mid-sized firms that we're talking about have turned to automation as a way to potentially mitigate some of the issues that we're finding with hiring. Also, like Amanda said, maybe you're looking a different way. We see about a third of the people either recruiting freelance workers or turning to outsourcing, either onshore or offshore, to really mitigate some of this. There are a variety of different ways that people are trying to tackle this problem. And it really might be a case by case basis depending on your firm and what strategy there is for you. But really, what we want to get across here is there are options either way, no matter what way that you're trying to choose.
Absolutely. It's interesting. We keep saying this talent pool is finite, right? Or near finite. So how do we get more? Because we're often turning away work, which we'll talk about in a second. But we're often, the issue is not that there's not enough work. There's not enough folks to do it. So with the same number of people, how can we get more work out of the same number of people? And this is not, this is not the working conditions of London around the turn of the century. This is like, how do we take care of our folks? And I mean, the option is probably technology. And this, Zach, this is your sweet spot, is the tech is getting really good. You don't even have to be good at the tech for it to be good for you now. So
that is very, very true. And something that I'm probably going to bring up a lot too is you don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be a tech expert to create automation. There are a lot of different ways to do that now. But as we're talking about in the big, what exactly people need to know about how to hire and different ways to think of it, I want to kind of look at the small as well. And I know that obviously Padgett has a lot of different firms out there. And I'm curious how one here really tried to tackle this talent problem.
Yeah, so this is Emily and Andre. They're in Tennessee, and they're one of our practice. They own one of our practices, and they took what was traditionally a seasonal position and made it a full-time salary position around tax, and knowing full well that they would hire a qualified candidate, not an intern. This is a professional person for as a salary position, and use her for tax prep during tax season, but also give her some freedom and free reign on the off season to better their own firm. So to go and do development, to look at internal processes, to manage, to talk to clients off season, right? So to go out and reach out to their good clients and build relationships with the clients in the off season. So they, again, took something that they had traditionally filled with a seasonal or contractor position and made it leap of faith and hired a full-time salaried person. And they have nothing negative to say about it. They have loved how this has worked out for their practice. It's really deepened the relationship with the clients. So.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly important for the mid-sized firms that we're talking about is kind of that flexibility. I really like what you said. During tax time, you have a tax person, but during the off season, you have somebody that can look into some of these improvements, talk to clients, do things in a different way. Maybe the larger firms can just hire different people for that, but in a mid-sized firm, you have to have people that have a few different hats and are trying to push things forward kind of no matter where they sit.
That's right.
So kind of tied in with all of this that we're talking about people, there is, like we said earlier, the very important business aspect of this as well. Everything around pricing and revenue. You may remember earlier we talked about priorities and how those priorities have shifted. Really, we've seen a big swing toward more people being interested in pricing and revenue, even within the past couple of years. I think, particularly post COVID, we saw a lot of people, okay, let's just get our operations in order. But now that the operations are starting to be a little bit more grounded, they are turning toward the growth and how exactly they're doing that. And what we're seeing, particularly in terms of pricing models, is a lot of time based pricing, a lot of flat fee pricing, or a lot of time based and hourly pricing in particular, is what I wanted to say, particularly for the mid sized firms. About two-thirds, that's primarily what they're offering. But even though a lot of people have been talking about value based pricing or doing things in a different way, that's not necessarily, Amanda, what we're seeing.
No, I will say this, and this is one of our core tenets at Padgett, is the the most important thing a firm can do is to get their pricing right. When things are chaotic, getting pricing right is the most important first step they can take. I do think this data is very interesting, and when we were talking about it last week, I was like, I've been around the industry for a long time, and they've been screaming at us about value-based pricing for a good decade. And you look at the data and you're like, well, either folks aren't hearing it or they're deliberately ignoring it. And what is that about? I don't know what that's about, but what I do know is that time-based and hourly pricing is about the least efficient way to do pricing, and that it's so admin heavy, right? It is so administratively heavy. There's a tendency to lose time, so you're not even probably realizing everything that you're doing anyway. So there's a reason that folks have been screaming at us about value-based pricing. It's more efficient on the admin side. We're making sure we're preserving our profit. But for some reason, it looks like folks aren't doing it.
Yeah. And I find that interesting too, because I know that you know your customers very well. I know Padgett firms very well. I take your word for it. But even in the data, we asked, oh, okay, so have you had success with these models, particularly in raising prices? And to your point, I feel like a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, time-based hourly pricing. Maybe we've had some success there, but it's tougher to get people to adopt value-based pricing or think about things in a different way, right? Maybe not necessarily. We're seeing success across the board, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a fear with firm owners and partners that if we change the way we price or we price higher, that clients are going to leave, and it just doesn't happen. I mean, we've seen it across Padgett where we push down price increases, and you would think, statistically, like I can look at this as a data person, right, and say, well, how many of these clients what is the price sensitivity? How many are actually going to leave? They don't leave. You may have a few that leave. Those tend to be, in my experience, the ones that you don't want anyway. The ones who are probably heavy needs, real needy, clingy, calling all hours. Those tend to be the ones that leave. Even if you lose a handful, I mean, we've seen numbers of clients leave less than 10% in our price increases, but the revenues more than make up for it. So you're increasing your fees, your revenue tends to at least plateau with less work, but generally your top line revenue is going to increase with pricing changes anyway, and you end up building capacity, right? You end up getting a little bit more time margin on your client base.
Very, very fair. And I mean, that's something to the point of what we're seeing on the screen. You can kind of see across the board that right-hand column, the top two box is basically Have you been either successful or very successful in raising prices? And pretty much no matter what type of pricing that you're trying to attempt, it's either between half to three quarters of people say, yes, we've been successful. In addition, there's a substantial portion that say, yeah, we tried, but really no change in the overall profit and revenue of the firm. There are very, very few, pretty much no matter the model, less than 10% say that we were either unsuccessful or very unsuccessful in raising prices on this particular model, which tells me across the board, there's a lot better value that today's firms could be having in terms of how they're pricing their services.
Yep. So the message is everybody needs to go out and price to what they think is they should be charging. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah. And I mean, you did a similar report with your own Padgett firms looking into how exactly Padgett firms have been approaching those increases and how clients have reacted.
Yeah, and it's the same data, right? So this would be a more specific data set group. Our firms run from 200,000 of revenue to about 2.2 million of revenue. So it's a very much narrower group than your report. But the answer is the same. I mean, we have seen that there have been great successes with raising fees anywhere from, tiny increases all the way up to 25, 50%. We don't lose top line revenue. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. So let's go from the macro to the micro once again. Tell me a little bit about this success story in terms of valuing their work out of Colorado.
Yeah, so Mary Beth is one of our practice owners in the Denver area, and she had historically been underpricing, just pricing what lower than she probably should have been. We know that, and she had an emotional tie to it. I think this happens especially with smaller firm owners, right? There's an emotional tie to it. I want to take care of my clients. What if they can't afford it? Then they're not going to have an accountant and we're going to have a bad relationship. We won't be friends anymore. And so there's so many threads of emotion when it comes to pricing. And so what we did at Padgett is we instituted a pricing tool across our network that will objectively price engagements. And so we have a matrix of you just put in the information, how many transactions, how many forms, whatever the engagement looks like, and it will objectively price for you. And Mary Beth took a leap of faith and she just did it and said, I'm going to get out of it. I'm going to remove myself from the emotion of this, and whatever the tool tells me the price should be, that's what I'm going to tell the client it's going to be. And for some of them, it was a huge increase, like doubling their prices. And
Wow.
they had great success. I think they lost one client.
Even with doubling prices, that's wild, but awesome. And I think that that's really shows the value of information as well, like the pricing tool that Padgett has, like some of, frankly, the tech tools that Thomson Reuters has as well. The more information that you're able to bring in to make those decisions and to think about things, again, maybe in a little bit different way, where it's not just, oh, I can't lose these clients. I got to do everything to keep them and just make sure that like they're happy no matter what, even if it's worse for my business. That's not great. You got to think about this as a business as well and assume that your clients are as well and make this into a little bit more of a business transaction with a little bit more information.
Yeah, and I'll say the one consistent thread across our Padgett firms that have done this as a project, like en masse, have done this repricing tool. The one thing that they all say is, "Oh, I should have done this sooner. I should have done this sooner."
We hear that a lot, definitely on the TR side of things as well. And as we're talking about this, let's get a little bit into the firm growth and strategy of it all as well. We've talked about the people, we've talked about the pricing. So ultimately, what are you trying to do with that? How are you trying to push the firm forward as a whole? So I'm going to bring up this slide. And it was funny when we had our pre-call because we said, oh, we might argue against these numbers, or at least what people are telling Thomson Reuters Institute's researchers, because what we found is people say, yeah, what we really want to do is grow the client base. That's number one. 2/3 overall of our sample said that, and 70% of people within the mid-sized firms said that. But what are they basing it off of? Vibes kind of honestly. You see that orange bar at the top. Only 38% of firms cite having a specifically defined growth strategy over the next 12 months, which frankly is a little bit lower than I'd want it to be. You have to think that firms really need to think through not only how am I doing business today, but how do I want to grow? And Amanda, maybe it's not necessarily growing the client base.
To your point about this, it's like throwing darts at the wall is what this kind of feels like. There's not a defined growth strategy, but you guys gave them a survey and said, what do you think? And they're like, oh, well, growing client base, the math checks out on that, right? If I have more clients, I'll grow, I'll make more money. But the reality is that when we talk to firm owners, they're like, okay, well, you know how you grow your client base. You have to market, you've got to pitch, you've got to have a product you believe in that you can deliver on time with good customer service. You're going to have to build the back end for adding, net new clients into your firm. And a lot of times they're like, I don't know about that. I don't know. We don't have capacity. I mean, we've seen it, across the industry with not just Padgett, but with other peer groups I belong to, where they're like, I want to be more profitable probably, and I might want to get bigger, but time out on going to get net new clients. When folks are calling in or sending in form request client leads, a lot of times we're saying we don't take them. So that's an interesting, that is not scientific. That is me and what I'm seeing in the industry. And with discussions, but I don't know that I believe this. I don't know that I believe this. I don't think that's really how a lot of firms are intending to grow their businesses.
Yeah, and like I said up top, all of this is self-reported. So we go out to the firms, we ask them, what are you doing? This is what they say, but we do notice in the data sometimes what they say and what they're actually doing may not necessarily be hand in hand. So you kind of have to interpret this data like Amanda is and talk to the people about, oh, okay, you say you want to grow the client base, but what actually are you trying to do here? And I think that kind of gets to the second bar on this screen as well, the greater use of technology and automation, which you can see on the right-hand side, a lot of large firms, they have money to throw at technology, but especially for the mid-sized firms like what Padgett serves, how exactly are they approaching this technology and automation that you're seeing right now?
Well, as you know, there are a lot of great things on the market. I mean, a lot of great tools on the market, and they keep getting better exponentially faster, I guess. What used to be, oh, how innovative to have an accounts payable tool that you can use online and pay your clients' bills. Now it's like generative AI driven, and I think our firm owners have like kind of come heads up after the pandemic and been like, okay, a lot of stuff happened in technology in the last 3 or 4 years. Like, I need to go figure this out. If I don't figure it out now, we are done. Yep. And so I think maybe that's some of what we're seeing is like this technology has been great for a long time, but it's gotten exponentially greater while we've been exponentially busier. And so I think a lot of folks are picking their heads up again and saying it's time for me to figure this out.
Absolutely. And I mean, when we drilled down, particularly on the tech and innovation piece, that's kind of what we saw as well is you would think, oh, we need to use our internal processes better. And there definitely is an element of that, but also a substantial number of people saying we need to figure out what's new here. So there's a lot of numbers on this slide, and I don't want to confuse people, but basically the question was, what are your top 5 investment priorities when it comes to technology and innovation? So if it was anywhere in the top 5, you'll see that right-hand bar, it'll show up as one of the top 5. So 66% of people, for instance, said, we need to improve our processes or workflows. That's understandable. But what I really thought was interesting is number 2 there, new tax technology solutions. 47% of people, which is a slight increase over 2022, said we need to have something new. We need to think about this technology in a better way. Scroll a little bit down, improving technical support. I think that's particularly probably a lot of larger firms, but a decent amount of mid-sized firms as well say, we have this technology, but we need to get our hands around it a little better. We need to understand how exactly we can use these within our processes, within our workflows, and try and figure out what exactly, to Amanda's point, this new future of tax is going to look like. I'm curious, Amanda, is there anything else from this particular slide that really stands out to you as well?
Yeah, I'll hit a couple of them. First of all, better use, improving processes and workflows. I'm so proud of the folks who responded to that, because a lot of times we just say we're going to go put our credit card in an app and it's going to solve our problems, when the problem is really the underlying process or workflow. So I applaud those who recognize that technology is kind of meaningless until you know what it's supposed to be doing and how. So hats off to the folks that raise their hand on that. I think this the number 2 and number 5, new tax tech and new practice management tools. I mean, that speaks to the labor shortage, right? That speaks to the talent problem. Is we've got to figure out ways to get more out of the folks we have in-house. And then again, using what we have better. So technical support, improving training and digital education. I mean, those kind of go hand in hand, right? So there are a lot of great things on the market that are out there. I mean, tons of things, but are we using them well? So like, just because something says it can do something doesn't mean it should. And so we need a curated, we need curated folks who understand technology in accounting firms, who know what is supposed to happen, and like, again, squeezing everything they can out of this technology. We do that at Padgett. That's one of the things we offer to our firms, is we act as sort of an outsourced CTO for our firms. But it's overwhelming, again. And remember, this is all around in the lens of, we don't have enough time to do the things we're committed to do already. So definitely understand why that's an investment priority for the folks that responded.
Yeah, and jumping off that, because you nailed the exact other one I wanted to talk about, which is that improving training and digital education. It's 45% saying it's ranked among their top 5. That's solid. That's actually down from 2 years ago, though, where 58% said the same. And that kind of worries me a little bit, because particularly right now, the pace of change of these technologies is only increasing. I mean, think about something. We mentioned generative AI. ChatGPT came out November 2022, 18, 19 months ago or so. It has changed a lot in a short period of time, but I'm not sure people necessarily know how to harness that. Using a different study that we didn't include here, but I mentioned I wrote a series of generative AI reports, including for tax and accounting professionals. We asked that question. So how many of you firms are actually providing generative AI training right now? The answer, less than 20%. And I think the number, particularly for tax firms, was 11%, if I remember correctly. That means, yes, this is out there. And particularly if you are trying to hire new juniors, they may be using this already because they kind of grew up with it. They're maybe a little bit more tech savvy, but they don't know how to do it correctly. They don't know, particularly if you're working with a lot of tax and accounting information, which tends to be private information. Are you actually using these tools not only correctly, but ethically, responsibly, privately, making sure that any data that is in the tool is actually in the best service of the client, and you're not just trying to rush through things? It's a little bit of a balancing act that I think today's firms have to try and walk, where you have the technology, you want to be doing the best for your client, but how, to your point, are you going to have the time to learn how to do this? But then also, how do you make sure that you're doing this all correctly?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Zach. So like, I think about my evolution as a firm owner over, call it 2012 to, for 10 years or so. And I lived the cloud evolution, right? Like, I lived what I call cloud, like real cloud, like browser-based internet app cloud. I lived that evolution. And I mean, there's still some folks that are on the laggard end of that, but it was probably a good, 6 years of runway where we were learning, we figured it out, and then we were comfortable with it. we don't have that time with generative AI. Like that timeline, to your point, I mean, we're less than 2 years with OpenAI having ChatGPT and it being embedded in things we don't even know about. And it has changed the way that work is being done already. So we can't sit on it and see how it goes. Like we can't see if it sticks. You know, like it's here. It's going to be part of the stuff that we touch every single day if it's not already. So there's can't wait and see, got to get in, and you're going to have to invest time and money into learning it.
Oh, that's great, Amanda. So then how? How do we do all this if we're a mid-sized firm and need to do more with less?
So this is a simplified version of the tech vetting process we use at Padgett for our technology partners. But the first thing, which I alluded to on that survey, is you've got to figure out what you need, and you've got to make sure you understand the workflow, the process that you are trying to make more efficient with the tool. Like the tool comes after that. So getting things documented, drawing them out, where are the holes, where are the speed bumps, where are the bottlenecks for the things you're trying to move. I'm thinking about data movement, right? Like, so generally a lot of these solutions are efficiently moving data around without people touching it. So where's the data coming in? Where is it going? Where is it ending up? Is it coming in correctly? Like figuring that piece out first and then saying, okay, here's the problem. I can't get from this system to this system without somebody touching it. Is there a tool that can fix that? So once you figure out what your needs are, then you go down the rabbit hole of Googling things, right? Now, I'm kidding. I'm half kidding because I've certainly done that. But
people do that, but it's not necessarily what they should be doing.
Right, you type in accounts payable tool 0 and or whatever it is, and 7 hours later, you've ordered a new bike. I don't know. Sometimes that stuff happens, but the way it should be done is that you figure out what your must-haves are and what would be nice-haves are, and then narrow it down to, maybe 3 to 5 players in the market, and then start asking people who actually use these things. I think that's the best strategy. So marketing websites are written by marketing people to sell things. They are not written by data integrators or accountants generally. So like it's better to really heavily rely on peer input and see, can you get what you need out of these tools? And then once you've made that decision, you have to jump. Like you've got to adopt and go in and shorten as much as possible that onboarding and implementation period, because it stinks. It's really uncomfortable for a lot of folks. So like the shorter the better. I like to use the burn the boats analogy. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there was a Spanish explorer who landed to burn the boats. And so the idea was like this captain said, we're landing on this new land and we're burning the boats so we can't leave. There's no turning back. And it's kind of the same thing with technology. Like once you have done your research, you have made this decision, you got to go in. You can't be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You've got to go all in and commit. Make the time to implement correctly. Hire people to help you implement if you can, and go for it. And know that you've made this good decision and your life's gonna be better for it once you get through the tough parts.
100%. And to the point earlier, hiring somebody doesn't necessarily mean increasing headcount. It means get a partner, somebody you trust, somebody that can help you through the process. Yeah. And I also want to stamp down on what you said in terms of research as well. I 100% agree. It's so important to be hands-on with this. And I think a lot of people think about product demos or trying technology for the first time to see, oh, this is what I don't like. This is what I don't think would be helpful. I want to cut this out, etc. But I think it's important to think about it from the opposite end of helping people realize, oh, the technological capability here, and get people thinking a little bit, maybe I can do things in a different way. Maybe I can have a different process for this, try and do my work a little bit differently, a little bit better. And somebody can tell you that, sure, but it's a lot more different and better to actually get your hands on a tool and be able to figure out for yourself, oh, this is what this can do. And this is what they're talking about when they say greater efficiency, do work quicker, better, faster, etc.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing in the tech market is a lot of expansion of functionality.
Sure.
So when I started working with cloud software, it was very specialized, right? It was very much like this piece does this one thing, this other piece does this other thing. But now we're seeing big companies buying up and folding stuff that may have felt off brand for them and folding it into their ecosystem. So having said that, if you've looked at something in the last 3 or 4 years ago, it could be vastly different. If you're looking at a tool, it could be very different than what it was back then. But it also unlocks possibilities of functionality and data movement that maybe you didn't realize were even out there.
Certainly. So, once again, let's talk a little bit about an example of this. Somebody who turned to technology to do something that was a little bit tough to do just so many hours of time before.
Yeah, so Jean is one of our owners in Utah, and she acknowledged that filing 1099s was in her practice before she moved was a very paper-based, very time-consuming process, and it shouldn't be. There's nothing really magical about 1099s. It is a reporting form, right? It is informational. It is not. There's really not a lot of human decision making that needs to go in the preparation of a 1099. So we helped her find a tool that would essentially automate 1099 filings out of her general ledger, and she doesn't even, as the owner and partner, doesn't even have to touch them anymore.
Certainly. And I know automation is definitely something that Thomson Reuters is focusing on. Checkpoint in particular is something going to be coming out with some generative AI features, but really UltraTax and across the board for tax and accounting firms, there are a number of different ways that Thomson Reuters is trying to invest in this. But ultimately, like we've been talking about, it comes down to not only the technology, but the people and process of this all as well.
Yeah, so Padgett has been a partner with Thomson Reuters for many, many years. I think we're one of the bigger partners of Thomson Reuters. And so we've fully invested in building around the suite, Checkpoint, UltraTax in particular. And what we do for our firms, for folks who join the Padgett network, we cover their UltraTax subscription for the first year that they're with us, so we can help them really learn how to get the most out of it if they're not already on UltraTax. Again, we have a tax support team for dedicated professionals who help our firms manage not just the UltraTax piece of it and the technology piece of it, but also the research and compliance issues.
Excellent. So if you are interested, make sure to write down that email on the screen, and we'll have our own emails at the end of this that you can write down and contact any of us as well, if that is something that you're interested in. But as we're really ending here, kind of big picture, what exactly do you want Padgett firms to know and really take away from what we've had here today?
Yeah, so we are the partner that may be the missing piece in a firm that is not optimized. So that key sweet spot of mid-sized firms between 200,000 and $2.5 million, we are very good at getting those firms to be working a flywheel of new leads. We have marketing support. We get them cranking out profitable work. That's the most important thing, that the owners are taking the profit back. And so we support our folks in all these ways. We'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in maybe getting some assistance.
Absolutely. And from Thomson Reuters standpoint as well, I mean, like you said, we've worked with Padgett for years and think it can be a very healthy partnership when firms are reaching out to try and get a little bit of help with their own processes, their own business, and technology increasingly is going to be a big part of that moving forward. So I think the overall theme of what we're talking about here today is don't be afraid to think about things in a different way. This is a changing landscape that is evolving very, very quickly, and a lot of these problems aren't going away either, whether it's in terms of hiring, figuring out the right pricing, client service, growth. But if you're adopting a growth mindset and a change mindset, then even if a lot of those problems aren't going away, maybe you're thinking about new solutions that you never really thought about before and could really pay dividends in the firm of the future.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. This has been an excellent webinar to present with you, Amanda. I really appreciate you joining us and really being able to present this with Thomson Reuters and Padgett together.
Thanks, Zach. It was a pleasure to talk about this nerdy data stuff with you. I love it. We can do it again at some other time.
Hopefully, if anybody wants to contact us, our contact information for both Amanda and myself is on the screen, and we can refer you to other people within Padgett or Thomson Reuters accordingly as needed. Thank you all for listening to this presentation. Hope it was an excellent one. And like Amanda said, we hope to see you again here very soon. Have a great day, everybody.